You can't cover the trans issue. Let's look at the Martine Croxall thing. We've now entered this parallel universe of post-truth where Martine Croxall has been found guilty of breaching impartiality by stating that a pregnant person is a woman. That's now seen as partisan, to state that a pregnant person is inherently a woman.
Didn't she just raise an eyebrow or something? I'm trying to remember.
The finding, once the complaints were made and investigated, was that she gave a strong impression of her own belief. But she could have just given a strong impression of fact, which is expressing surprise that women should be described as, quotes, pregnant people. What does pregnant people even really mean?
Something Orwellian. It is nuts. Did you hear Catherine Ryan on Have I Got News For You? Because I think that gives a really good insight into how they actually think.
I actually gave up watching Have I Got News For You many years ago.
Yes, so did I. I just saw the clip on X, and she said, she said pretty much what you just said as a summary of how they think. She said she was on that sort of the woke side, I suppose, or the BBC side, and she said, they edited the thing to show the thing that is the true thing in the first place, something like that. And, because Trump did incite violence, to which Ian Hislop said, I think that's very sensible. And then there was a huge round of applause.
Yes.
I mean, it would be so easy for Ian Hislop to keep his kind of lefty brand and everyone, but to come down really hard on this.
Yes.
It seems like an open goal.
But then lots of the people that have been accusing the Telegraph of a coup and the BBC is the victim in all this, let's be perfectly honest, the only victims in all this are the viewers, who have been given skewed coverage. This attempt to paint the BBC as the victim has been made by people with a vested interest in the BBC. The Nick Robinsons of this world, David Yelland, who was the editor of The Sun, is now pretty hard left and, funny enough, has a podcast which goes out on BBC Sounds. Who would have thought it? Ian Hislop, who I really do hugely admire as the editor of Private Eye, and I think Private Eye has done some exceptional, phenomenal journalism over the course of his editorship, and I think he showed an immense amount of courage. I think he showed an immense amount of courage in the face of defamation, action, threats, and all the rest of it. And look at the work that they did on the Post Office, one of the first organisations in the UK to break that scandal. But he wants to presumably keep appearing on Have I Got News For You on BBC. And I think that's unfortunate. I also don't like this assumption that everybody else agrees with me. Everybody thinks what we think. No, what happened was, back in the days of people insisting that women could have penises and that men could grow cervixes, there were people like you and I and countless others in the public eye who said, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. There was a much, much, much greater number of people out in public privately thinking it was ridiculous, but the majority was too silent because so many people were getting cancelled for stating the bleeding obvious when it came to biological sex that naturally, Fred Bloggs down the road and Ina Sharples up the pub couldn't express themselves freely for fear of being branded transphobic and therefore in some way inherently evil.
Well, Hislop didn't say anything really about that. I mean, Have I Got News For You barely touched it.
No, because there is a strange lack of courage when it comes to challenging so-called progressive groupthink, or let's go further and say sometimes the liberal left can be bullies.
It's a hard one though, isn't it? Because you're absolutely right about Ian Hislop. He's faced down all sorts of mobs and all sorts of defamation cases, for example. I don't know if that's actually true. He's sort of the world record holder for the most defamation cases or something like that. And good on him. And here we go. And then it seems such an obvious one. Men shouldn't really be going in women's toilets and so on. Easy win again, and just silence for years.
But then this is the curious thing about that entire debate. Those who have gender critical views never attempted to cancel those who suggested it would be a good idea to have boxers with male chromosomes compete against boxers with female chromosomes for men, as you say, to go into women's prisons, go into women's refuges, go into women's changing rooms. I mean, if you actually think about that as a concept and as an argument, the argument that trans women are women, it is in a way such a strange and anti-biologically sound, sort of slightly amoral argument when it comes to women and girls safeguarding, that you could have pointed and shouted and said, right, you're cancelled. You have no place in public life. How dare you be saying it? Be it the senior bods at the NHS, members of the government, top celebrities, and all the rest of it. You would actually reserve the same treatment for people who, like Dawn French, in that extremely misjudged video that she recorded about October the 7th and all the rest of it. But the right don't tend to want to cancel people because in many respects, oddly, the right are the real liberals. They're the ones who are saying, I completely support your right to express yourself. I just would like my right to disagree to be respected. When it's in reverse, of course, the whole situation changes. And if you express a view that is anti the view of some of the liberal bullies, the solution, as far as they're concerned, is to silence, is to shame, is to cancel. And then you have situations where Kathleen Stock and others are marched out of university buildings by people clad in balaclavas. I mean, this is the other strange thing, just in terms of the moderate right. I don't see any right-wing commentators who don't think women can have penises dressing in masks and balaclavas, pointing at the left and saying, out, 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 scum, scum, scum.
Yeah. Raus mit dir. I think, I wonder if there's 2 points. I was just thinking as you're saying it, I wonder what that is. And I wonder, one, if it might be to do with, I suppose if you're looking at the cult, whose side is more cultish or whose arguments are frailer. And when you've got a frail argument or you're part of a kind of cult, you're going to lash out at anybody who doesn't agree with your doctrine. And then I wondered to what extent it's to do with the cultural gatekeepers at the particular time. So back when Monty Python or whatever was going on, it might have been the right trying to cancel and saying get out because they held a little bit more sway in the cultural zeitgeist. Whereas today, it's so lefty, this kind of cultural, like, the what TV, newspapers, not newspaper necessarily actually, but TV and all that.
Yes.
It's about keeping those opinions out. We're now on the outside sort of shouting in, going, hang on, but let us say our thing. But we don't have that kind of, they're in there going like, get out,
But it's also about the desire to toxify perfectly mainstream views. There is an attempt maybe out of a deep-rooted insecurity that if people don't side with me, first of all, there's this sort of righteous indignance. I am progressive, forward-thinking, a liberal through and through. I strive for equality. I think that trans women are women, and therefore if you disagree with me, you are somehow beneath me from a moral and sort of ethical and equality point of view. Of course, what that ignores is there's nothing more intolerant than tolerant people wanting to cancel others because they disagree. Similarly, and there may be a degree of insecurity to some of those views, but there is also then an attempt to brandish people things.